Hi, everyone. This is your host, Jack Rico, and thanks for listening to episode 72 of the Highly Relevant Podcast, the U.S. Latino show focused on the relationship between Latino and mainstream pop culture. My guest today is Ecuadorian-American actress and singer Michelle Veintimilla, who currently plays the villainess Firefly on Fox's Gotham series. She has a solid resume, which includes performing on Broadway with legendary icon Chita Rivera, working in film opposite Russell Crowe, Octavia Spencer, and Aaron Paul, as well as TV credits in Blue Bloods and The Good Wife. If you haven't heard of her, you're going to hear about her now. She joins me today to talk about how she got the part of Firefly, why identifying as Hispanic is crucial in Hollywood, and why she just doesn't like telenovelas.
You still haven't told us how you're going to take over the underworld.
Who says I want to do that? I'm an artist. I just want to paint the town crazy.
Michelle, first of all, very nice to talk to you. Welcome to the Highly Relevant Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Michelle, tell me what the experience has been like at Gotham.
Being back, it's been so much fun, and it's been so cool to see how the production value has been elevated and the characters are more fleshed out and people are really taking ownership of their roles, and a lot of the crew is the same. So it was so fun to go back and see everybody, and I was really welcomed back with open arms, and it was just such a blast. It's such an incredible show to be a part of.
How did you get to Gotham? What was the path that you took in order to be in a position that many people would consider to be successful at the moment for you?
I think it started back in 2015, and they were casting for season 2, and I actually was auditioning for a couple different parts. I ended up auditioning and testing for Tabitha, and that didn't come through, and then finally I got an audition for a character named Bridget, and the audition was only like a page long, and I didn't know that she was going to turn into a villain eventually. Mm-hmm. But I think because they had seen my work a couple times in previous auditions, they didn't have to give me such an extensive audition. Mm-hmm. But I ended up working that role, and I didn't know until I was in my fitting that she eventually turned into Firefly. So it was actually kind of a pleasant surprise.
So you didn't know that?
No, I didn't know. But obviously I was like so happy to do anything on the show because it's such an incredible show to be on. I would have been happy to like stand in the back and do nothing.
So Michelle, I'm from Colombia, but born here in New York City. I know you're a New York City resident as well. Oh, nice. What's your heritage?
My parents are both from Ecuador.
Oh, that's cool. So you're like, when the World Cup comes in, you're like, Ecuador, let's win the World Cup.
Yes. Yes, I'm so excited for that. That's this summer, right?
That's in several weeks, like about 12 weeks from now or something like that.
I love it.
It's funny. We're in a time right now as Hispanics in this country where we're being asked to sort of take hold of our own identity, cultural identity. Mm-hmm. If you're Hispanic, some people try to dismiss that in particular businesses just because they might discriminate if you're Hispanic. And so people change their last names, et cetera, et cetera. Even amongst Hispanics themselves, are you really Latino? You don't speak Spanish, or you don't look Latino, or things like that. How have you been identifying professionally and socially with your culture? Do you say you're Hispanic when someone asks you, or do you say you're just American? How are you identifying nowadays?
I 100% say that I'm Latina, and I try not to shy away from that either. If anyone ever thinks, I think depending on how I do my hair and makeup, sometimes I don't look quote unquote Latina, and people are surprised to learn that I am and don't believe me when I tell them that I am.
Right.
And then they're like, oh yeah, we'll try to speak Spanish. And then I do, and they're surprised. And sometimes people are like, yeah, you absolutely look Latina. But I always tried to. I always lead with saying that I'm Latina. I think representation is really, really important.
Why do you think it's really, really important?
I think more often than not, Latinos are afraid or threatened, or they don't think that they're worth it, or they don't think that things will come to fruition for them, and they kind of hide in the shadows and
Mm-hmm.
are happy to do things that or are willingly diminishing or minimizing themselves. And when you see a woman, a Latina woman in particular, on such a high profile show like Gotham, I would hope that young girls, especially in the first in season 2, where I'm not
Mm-hmm.
in like a completely like head to toe costume, um, they were able to see that there was like a young Latina girl on the show, like playing a villain, and that they can do it too. And I know for me, it was really important, especially when I decided that I wanted to be an actress, to see people like Penelope Cruz on the screen and Ava Mendez. And um, I remember being in middle school and seeing Vanessa Hudgens on High School Musical. And that was really important for me because it was the first time that I was able to say, like, okay, I can do this too.
Right.
So
There's somebody there
it
that
is
looks
really,
like me.
yeah. And that I think it's also really important. And as- I- for me in particular, I think it's about the stories too, because I personally am tired of auditioning for the the daughter to like a Colombian.
Is that something frequent that comes up, that you're the daughter of a Colombian narco drug lord?
You know, because there's like a very specific rule in SAG that you have to fulfill a diversity quota, I more often than not get a lot of auditions, whether they're written for Latin women or
Oh.
not.
Uh-huh.
But I think what doesn't, not that it bothers me, but something that I've noticed is that, like, yeah, I'm auditioning a lot, and that's really cool and important, but it also has to do with the stories that are written about Latinos. Very
Yeah,
seldom do
right?
I get an audition that is written for a Latina and doesn't fall under the category of like a mafia family.
Right. Or a
And
stereotype
and
in some way.
yeah, and that's the representation that I think I'm talking about, because you need to tell the stories of the perseverance and the stories of immigration and the stories of legal immigration, like my family. Like, my grandfather came over from Ecuador and brought all of his 8 children over here legally.
Oh,
He
wow.
worked here for 2 years to prove himself, and that's the only reason why I'm even here today, or even exist here. I could have very well been born in Ecuador and it would have been a completely different story.
Hmm.
So I think those are the stories that need to be told, because then people who are in Latin will see themselves in those stories, and then there wouldn't be such a divide between the two.
Right. Now, have you ever felt any pressure to go blonde and to look more white American by any chance? You know,
No, never. No.
that's okay. That's awesome to hear. That's awesome to hear. So
Yeah.
you're happy with the way you look. You don't feel that your agent or managers or a casting director says, "Hey, you know what? If you put on some blue contact lenses and dye your hair blonde, you know, you could get more
Oh
work."
no, I don't think I think that's very like circa 1998. I think right now, I think people want you to look more Latina because it makes your show look cooler. You know,
That's great.
it looks cooler if you have a woman of color on your show. So I think more often than not, people are encouraging you to look more like yourself, which is really exciting.
So you know, there's two subcultures of Latino actors. There's the ones that do the novellas, and then there are the ones that do American television and film. Have you ever auditioned for a novella on Univision or Telemundo or like Televisa or anything like that?
No, I never have.
Now,
Never.
why wasn't that ever an option? Did you ever grow up watching those novellas, and did you ever say, "Oh my God, I'd love to do a novella"? Or was it more like, you know what, novellas isn't my thing. I'm just going to go for the TV shows and the movies.
I don't love novellas.
Why is that? Is
I
it the
don't.
format?
I
Is
don't.
it?
I think it's the dramatization of Latin culture, and it exaggerates it a bit. And I think novellas tend to lean towards what we were just talking about, of like not really not really leaning into like the authenticity of like what it means to be a woman living in South America. More often than not, women in South America aren't dressed to the nines and 3 pounds of makeup, and like most of the time the women are just arguing about a man.
Mm-hmm.
They almost never pass the Bechtel test, and those are really the stories that I wanted to tell or represent personally.
What kind of stories do you want to tell and be a part of?
I know what I'm not interested in telling, and those are the stories of like I said, mafia families. I would almost prefer to tell any story besides that one at that point. Because, for example, I have a friend named Priscilla Garcia Jacquier, and she just started a web series called Latinx Who Want It All. And
I got to check it out.
We were talking one day about how, you know, narco, she's from Colombia and she grew up in Colombia, and her father was a politician and was kind of like in the civil war that was happening in the 90s. And she hates that like shows like Narcos kind of like supersede any other part of her identity and overrides any other story of her life. And even though it was a very big part of her life, the depiction of it didn't really, even though like shows like Narcos are like incredible shows, she doesn't feel like she was represented very well. So I'm interested in like telling her story, and again, like telling the story of my grandfather coming over here and living in the US and not doing anything illegal.
You're right.
Because those stories are more interesting. I guess the more quotidian stories.
Back to Gotham really quick. What would you say is the most exciting thing about being a part of a show like Gotham and playing Firefly?
Yeah, I think Firefly is finally coming into her own. And actually, when I watched last week's episode, I think what excited me the most is that I was sitting at a table with some of the most famous villains in Gotham, and I was the only woman representing there. And my friend pointed out, they're like, "You're like Lady Boss representing," and I'm like, "You're right, I am." And it didn't really hit me until I was watching it, but that really excited me. It's been really cool to watch all the villains come to fruition. It's been cool to see Jim Gordon navigate his new role of captain and fighting against them, and it's a really fun time, especially being at the end of the season. It's a really fun time to be a part of the show, and things really get crazy, and I'm excited for everyone to see it.
I know that you worked with Chita Rivera on The Visit.
I did.
I saw that show on Broadway. So
you did?
So
wow.
I saw you as little young Claire.
You.
So that's just a 6 degree of separation connection that I just did right now.
Thank you for seeing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw it with my mom, and so we loved it. And I hope to see you doing more Broadway shows as well here in New York City.
Thank you so much.
And que viva Ecuador.
Que viva Ecuador.
All right, Michelle, take it easy. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Okay, talk soon. Bye.
That's it for me. Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Michelle Veintimilla, and catch her as Firefly in the final episodes of Season 4 on Fox's Gotham. If you like this podcast, please share, retweet, and recommend our show on all your social media platforms. And as if you did not know already, you are the only way our show can grow. So please go ahead and share as much as you can. I'm Jack Rico. See you next week on another episode of Highly Relevant.